You're listening to Coast Business Radio with Mike Ryan.
On Coast Business Radio today, Senator Pauline Hanson joins us to discuss COVID-19 and a possible easing of restrictions on business and shares her views on China's Belt and Road Initiative.
Daniel Andrews is bloody fool to actually go into the Belt and Road with the Chinese government. And actually, under that agreement, they want to bring out their own workers, and so hence Australians won't get the jobs.
Shane O'Reilly from O'Reilly's Rainforest Retreat says rely less on government marketing and more of your own.
Yeah, well, I'd go almost the other way and say I wouldn't rely on them at all, because that's putting your life in their hands.
I was being polite.
Yeah, I'm not, unfortunately, but no, these days there's really no excuse for, even down to someone's got one B&B, there's absolutely no excuse for not marketing themselves through social media.
Tweed Shire Councillor James Owen says the coronavirus has been disastrous for the Tweed region.
Oh, it's huge. I spoke this morning to one of the general managers of one of our clubs, the Seagull Leaf Club out there at West Tweed. I mean, they're completely shut down and they have no idea at the moment when they're going to be opening again.
And spare a thought for Fido. George Costi, the State Operations Manager of RSPCA Queensland, tells us that they have been severely impacted by the coronavirus.
We were forced to close all 6 Gold Coast shops and 9 of the other regional op shops, and they were quite very successful.
And local brewer Lost Palms Brewing Company has adjusted its strategy to keep supplying the Gold Coast with liquid gold. We catch up for a virtual beer with Zac Nalder.
So I guess we can all do our bit and get out there and support them when they support others.
You certainly hope once we get out of this that the happy hour may be extended to like 3. Is that a possibility? I don't know. Just a thought.
I reckon it'll be happy days.
And finally, don't forget to subscribe. Coming up next, Senator Pauline Hanson.
Coast Business Radio is the home for business from the Gold Coast to Byron Bay and beyond. Whether you're an entrepreneur, small business owner, or just managing your family's assets, the Coast Business Radio podcast can help. Find the resources you need to manage your money, start your latest venture, grow your business, and be able to compete in a global market.
Talking business, nothing but talk.
From One Nation on the line is Pauline Hanson. Pauline, welcome to Coast Business Radio.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you, Mike.
Now, before we get into the serious stuff, even though the kids say this is serious, with social distancing being what it is, will the Easter Bunny be able to deliver eggs?
Well, I hope so. Of course he will. Easter Bunny goes anywhere.
But
don't disillusion me. No coronavirus for the Easter Bunny, okay?
But they're not great.
Will deliver eggs.
They're not great at social distancing, are they?
No, they shouldn't be. There has been some leniency somewhere, hasn't there?
Yeah, there has indeed. Now, the coronavirus, the effect on business throughout Australia and Queensland has been absolutely catastrophic. When do you think it's safe to lift restrictions on business?
Well, the government is waiting for this weekend because most people won't be working over the Easter weekend. I think they're going to wait and see how this goes over the weekend, then reassess it and look at maybe relaxing it a little bit. The coronavirus, for people must understand, the government is saying this is at least for 6 months. I think it's going to be longer than that if we can't control it. The SARS that we had in 2003, of course it wasn't in Australia, and the MERS are actually coronaviruses. The MERS was in 2012. They have never found a vaccine for those 2 viruses. And that's why I think they're going to have difficulty finding a vaccine for it. So hence, if we can actually keep ourselves isolated, get rid of the infections that are happening, they will slowly relax the rules and people will actually be able to go back to work. Businesses will start to open, but we've got to be very tight on immigration, people coming into the country, until the rest of the world starts reducing it and we get rid of the virus. Because even if the vaccine is found, it will not come into effect for about 1.5 to 2 years because it has to go through a process of human testing.
Which really is interesting. If you think about it, if they do relax it, Because at the moment we're saying we can't get within that 1.5 metres, 2 metres of each other, and that's why they've closed restaurants and pubs and that sort of thing. If they do relax it, there's always the chance it may just resurface again.
Well, you've got to look at the fact now that people are actually still doing their shopping, going to shopping centres, they're doing their shopping at Woolworths. So they've got markers on the floor for people to keep the distance. Most people are keeping the distance and taking precautions with them, and I've noticed a lot of people wearing masks or wearing gloves. People will still be able to do that. If you relax it in these restaurants and different places, do the spacing between the tables, don't overcrowd venues, and they won't bring in going to sporting events and huge crowds of people there. That won't happen. I don't believe that will happen for a long time.
The infringement of civil liberties, I've just seen some things that sort of remind me of what they would do in Russia or in China itself. Drones following people, police booking people for, and I know that they're doing what they believe is right, but it just seems like we're losing everything that we fought for. What's your thoughts on that?
Look, I agree with you. Especially today, now they're setting up barricades for people to ensure that they don't head to the Gold Coast. Now, they're saying if you have more than 2 people in the car, they're going to fine every person in that car. And that's the liberties there of the people. You've got a reason why you're going someplace. I think it's over the top in those cases, and I'm not happy about it. And the case of the woman sitting on a park bench, she's not around anyone, she's sitting on the park bench, and the police officer fines her. That is wrong. Even going to the beach, okay, these beaches were packed. But when you have public transport, buses, trains, that people are packed into it, or shopping centres, people are going to the beach. And actually sunshine is one of the best things that you can get because you need the vitamin D. And I tell people, and that was told to me by Professor Ian Brighthope, who said people should be taking high doses of vitamin D and vitamin C to counteract this.
So then what would you suggest? Do you think that we should then open the beaches, that we make sure that we still have the police doing what police do, making sure there are only 2 people and that social distance between people on the beach? I sort of see that being more beneficial than saying you must not go to the beach. We're going to shut the car parks. We're going to make it miserable for you. You have to stay home. Whereas we're adults and we act like adults. So why not give us that space on the beach, that 2 metres from each other? You're not doing any more damage than going for a walk. Yet you're getting, as you said, the vitamin D.
Totally agree with you, and that's what I have been saying, because people need that exercise. If you shut people up in their units into the houses, especially with children around, because a lot of parents are fearful of sending their kids to school or to childcare centres, because that's where they pick up a lot of viruses and diseases and coughs and colds, very much so in childcare centres. So I believe that it's good for people to go out and get that exercise, get out of the house. They need to do it, otherwise they're going to go mad with the kids. I'll tell you what, if I had my 4 kids constantly day in, day out, I'd go mad. I couldn't stand it.
Well, they'd be working much harder, I would imagine, too. My dad always said from the bush, there's loads to be lifted.
Oh, look, I totally agree with you. Kids, you've got to give them chores, and that's the problem with the kids these days. Everything's done for them. So anyway, we're not getting into that one. I've got another opinion on that one.
Okay, we'll leave that one alone for next time. But look, the Chinese, you're a critic of the Chinese with the Belt and Road Initiative. Anthony Bergen writes in the Australian November 3, 2019, the Chinese are weaponising federalism by driving a political wedge between the federal and state positions on the Belt and Road Initiative. That's the conclusion to be drawn from Daniel Andrews' recent announcement that Victoria has struck a new deal with China under the BRI. Andrews signed an agreement with China's National Development and Reform Commission that will focus on infrastructure, innovation, and trade development and market access. Now, what are your thoughts on that? Are we being taken over by the Chinese? They own everything at the moment, it seems.
We are most definitely being taken over by the Chinese, and it's happened for many, many years. Daniel Andrews is bloody fool to actually go into the Belt and Road with the Chinese government, and actually under that agreement they want to bring out their own workers, and so hence Australians won't get the jobs. They've done it around the world in other countries, and they've got it happening in South Africa. You've got the islands that we have, the Pacific Islands. And I know that I went over to Greece just recently on a delegation, and in Greece they're trying to buy up everything they possibly can in Greece. Greece said to me, no, it's not going to happen. Apparently I've heard, yes, they are. And they're looking at buying up the port in Greece. They actually took over in Sri Lanka at the ports, an airport in Sri Lanka as well. So it's happening around the world. China wants to be the powerhouse of the world. They want to be the leading nation, and we've allowed it to happen. Stupid governments have opened up our free trade to them. We've brought in their cheap rubbish. We've destroyed our own industries and manufacturing, and I have been actually speaking out against this since years ago, in 1996 when I was first elected to Parliament, because I could see the writing on the wall. Now's the time, and I think it's a wake-up call, not only for Australia but the rest of the world, that we now have to say, hang on, enough's enough. We have got to stop being so dependent on China or any other nation and look at ourselves and start our own industries and manufacturing and to become self-sufficient and start making the things that we need in this country to survive in a crisis. Just to let you know what China has bought, and of course we all know what infrastructure they have bought up. But what's very important, and this is what I've been saying about water, China actually owns, our surface water. Okay, I'll speak about Queensland. 19.3% of our surface water is foreign-owned, and 11% of our underground water. In total, 19.1% in total for Australia's groundwater and surface water is foreign-owned, and 10.4%, that's in Queensland, and 10.4% is foreign-owned groundwater Australia-wide. So, and again, in your residential housing, 91% of all approvals by FIRB in the residential, that's 2017-18, 51 billion, China bought up 23%. That is 26.6 billion. So China's been buying up a lot of residential houses in Australia as well, which actually inflates the price of housing in Australia and puts it out of the reach of many Australians to own their own house.
Many would say then that's an invasion by stealth.
It is, and it has been allowed to happen. Yes, it is. See, this is why I complained to the government about now there could be a fire sale on, and a lot of people who are forced to sell their homes or their businesses will be bought up by foreign investment. See, people understand that foreign investment, okay, fair enough, but people get angry, Australians get angry when it's foreign ownership. When you sell your essential services to a business or company or a foreign government, they're not buying it because they like you, they're buying it to actually control you or to make profits out of it. And shareholders want profits out of the business. So your essential services, your gas, your water, electricity, and your telecommunications should always be in the hands of the government for the people to be run at a cost that will cover maintenance, but at a cost that is reasonable to the people, not to make huge profits out of it. And we've seen the sale of our essential services go to foreign investors, and look at our electricity. The prices are skyrocketing. Mm-hmm. Our water is foreign-owned. Water prices are skyrocketed where the farmers can't afford to buy the water any longer. And unless we actually build the infrastructure, as I want to do with the hybrid Bradfield scheme, to build that and bring the water inland to Australia, we are going to be in destitute. We will never address the droughts that we have. We will never open this country to produce the food that we need for our own needs, plus also to export.
And I suppose now really is a wake-up call, but we really didn't need this this sort of wake-up call because it's just far too severe. Look, just back to the coronavirus in China. I mean, I see that the British government, the UK, is going to, there's word that they may be suing China for $6.5 trillion. What's your thoughts on that? I mean, should China be accountable for the coronavirus and what's happening?
Yes, they should be. You see, China knew they had the coronavirus last December, and actually they warned the doctors who wanted to tell people the coronavirus was there, but they shut them down. So they allowed this to go on without forewarning the world. A lot of the Chinese, sorry, Mike, a lot of the Chinese actually went to Italy, northern Italy, for the ski season, and that's why the infection was very rampant in Italy. And of course, when these countries, Italians are an older population, and that's where it's affected them a lot more than what it has in Australia. But I think they should be held responsible for it, and the whole world. I think the world's angry with it. There's going to be a backlash from the governments around the world towards China with regards to this.
How do you see when we come out of it? I mean, and they could take, as you said, 18 months because there is no vaccine right now, so we've got to really just try and manage it. But when we finally get out of it, how do you see the economy? I'm sure there's going to be probably a honeymoon period, the joys and celebrations of being able to give your mate a high five or a handshake or whatever. But take away that honeymoon, we've got to repay the money back, don't we?
How I see the economy was, although they say for the last 30 years we've actually been travelling really well, and we've just had our AAA rating endorsed again for Australia. I believe Australia was on a slide that we were going to have a bit of an economic crisis in Australia. As I've travelled around Australia, and I spoke to a lot of industries and manufacturing, they're actually just hanging on because a lot of them were being forced out of business due to rising electricity costs, rent prices, cost of living, and they were struggling. And when I went to these small towns and different places, not even small towns, shops were closing, quite a number of shops. So that was a clear indication that the economy wasn't doing real well. The government has, over the years, propped up the economy by bringing in high immigration numbers. Their percentage of immigration to the GDP was basically 1.7% was due to immigration, which propped up the economy. Now, that's why I think the government needed to pull back on that. You can't have equivalent to one Canberra coming into the country every year. And we were just, it was a Ponzi scheme. Immigration had to be pulled back. So out of this, the government is propping up the economy now by paying the workers JobKeeper and JobSeeker, which I agree with. But as we come out of this, we need then to look at infrastructure projects which will keep the economy going with jobs, but also provide the infrastructure that we need to take us further into the future. We can't just look at 12 months down the track. We've got to look at the long-term vision for the nation, as in building the pipeline from the west coast for the gas. So if we're not going to go nuclear and you want to shut down the power stations, we've got to have an economy where we can produce cheap power to run the industries and manufacturing that we need to be encouraging businesses to get into.
One thing that I think has been forgotten, being a bushie from way back, from Victoria of all places, the drought. It seems to be forgotten, but it's still there, isn't it? The rural communities are just doing it so tough. The coronavirus, fires, floods, drought. I mean, why would you want to be on the land?
The people on land, I love the land myself. The people on land, they're a part of it. It's in their blood, and I get it. I understand, and it's been generations. It's a connection to the land. But now the average age of the farmer is about 54, and they're telling their kids, "There's no future for you here. You might as well leave." And then the more farmers that we leave the land, that land is then being bought up by foreign ownership. And just to tell you, 25% of our agricultural land in Tasmania and the Northern Territory is foreign owned. So they're buying it up and they're going straight from paddock to plate and exporting the food out of the country. So what I'm saying to these people, they are doing it tough, and that's why the government needs to look after the Australians who are prepared to stay on the land, give them tax incentives to actually stay there. And I'm very passionate about that, looking after our rural and regional areas, give them the facilities that they need. It's no good shutting down hospitals. It's no good shutting down schools, taking teachers out. There's no nursing home services. The elderly have to move to the cities to get care and attention. Then the families follow. So this has been ongoing. And if they think that they're going to bring out refugees into the country and stick them into a country town and think that's going to keep it going, they're fools, because it won't happen. And you need the lifeblood of this nation, that people are prepared to get out there and work. They're the salt of the earth. They're the people that we need, because they're the ones that will stay for the long term if we give them the resources that they need to stay on the land.
Pauline Hanson, appreciate your time. All the best. Enjoy Easter.
Thanks, Mike, and to you and your listeners. It is a shame with the coronavirus. It's going to keep a lot of families, apart, and those grandparents who love to see their grandkids find the eggs. But I hope some parents take videos of this and watch the kids run around the yard trying to find the Easter eggs or Easter bunny coming to them. So, happy Easter to everyone, and to you, Mike. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Pauline Hanson from One Nation.
If you're in business in Australia, right now you're facing one of your toughest challenges. It's not business as usual, and it's hard to know where to turn. Business Australia can help you manage your responsibilities to your employees, look after their health and well-being, and assist with strategies to maintain and sustain your business. We've been helping Australian businesses through thick and thin for 194 years, and we're here for you now. For free advice and support, visit businessaustralia.com.
This is the Coast Business Radio Podcast.
After 94 years of welcoming the public to its idyllic hinterland retreat, the iconic O'Reilly's Rainforest retreat has closed its doors temporarily. But good news, the vineyard is still opening. Shane O'Reilly is the Managing Director of O'Reilly's and is also the Chairman of the Queensland Tourism Industry Council. Shane, tough times.
Oh, Mike, it is. But as we have all been told, we've just got to survive it and get through it, I suppose, and where possible, keep our staff busy doing a bit of maintenance and cleaning, and hopefully we get out the other end.
Also, you still have most of your staff there, and you're of course waiting for the JobKeeper allowance to come through. But why? Can I just ask you why the staff are still there? Is it because they really can't go anywhere else?
Well, the staff at O'Reilly's, there's about 70 on site, half of which are here because they just live here and they don't really want to, or they maybe don't have family close by and they don't want to go to them. So they're here and they're, helping and doing a few things, a few odd jobs around the place. But the other half are international visa holder staff, unfortunately, who aren't eligible for any of the job seeker or JobKeeper payments, have no money to be able to fly home to their country. And probably even if they had the money, they couldn't get back there anyway now. So we're having to house all our staff for free. We're not charging any of them, and feed them for probably 5 months or 4 months until this comes to an end, because those, particularly those internationals, just don't have anywhere else to go.
But I have to say, what a lovely place to do it tough.
Well, yes, I suppose it is. And the park's still open, so people can still go for walks and that type of thing. So, yeah, that's nice. But it is eerie having a big resort like this and just having no people around at all. It's very strange.
I was just reading about the coronavirus and how it's having an effect on pollution around the world. And I just recall, just from you mentioning that, there was this view of the mountain range in some part of India, which a guy said he's been living there for 30 years, has never seen those mountains, but because no one is out and no one's driving, he can actually see things he hasn't seen before. So I suppose there's an upside to a dreadful occurrence at the moment.
Well, that's certainly right. I think there's a lot of talk about that with the Himalayan region particularly, but certainly we don't notice any difference up here. It's still pretty clean and clear and pretty nice, really.
They say it's God's country, but look, O'Reilly's been affected by a few recent events. I'll just go through quickly. Fire, the coronavirus. On top of that, the insurance, which I was just reading about it. It's just astronomical. Look, can you tell us about the insurance thing, because it really has jumped just out of reality. And it would seem that you're not the only one in the same boat. Others are also in the same boat with exorbitant fees.
That's right, Mike. I think it's going to affect, unfortunately, it's probably going to affect all of Australia as their insurance comes around for renewal. Ours just happened to be up for renewal at the beginning of the year, so we were like first cab off the rank. But certainly for a lot of the Australian-based insurers, decided that even though we're surrounded by a rainforest that hasn't burned in 3 million years, that is still too high a risk. And so when you go to London, the lender of last resort as such, they can pretty well name their price, and that's what they've done. And that's going to affect, I think, businesses. Doesn't matter whether they're on Tasmania or Kangaroo Island or Adelaide Hills or the Hunter Valley, it's going to affect them all as it rolls out. And it does really require some government intervention. I'm not a big government intervention type guy, but this certainly does require, I think we need to look at caps on payments of liability and maybe even underwriting some of the more risk areas for businesses so that they can get insurance, which is means their business is still viable and can still operate in those regional areas.
Just to give us an idea, Gold Coast Bulletin said that last year your insurance was $380,000, covered losses up to $70 million, and this year it was quoted that the figure has jumped to $1.3 million with coverage of just $10 million. Is that about right on the ballpark figure?
It's hard to believe, but it's absolutely correct. It's hard to believe those figures.
That's just How does a business survive then? I mean, how do you budget from your plan, start of the financial year, just before the financial year, and you say, okay, this is what our insurance is going to be. We haven't had a fire here, as you said, in 3 million years. How do you adjust to that? I mean, how does a business survive?
Well, it's very challenging. Very challenging. You've got to look at all your costs, and I suppose money you'd normally put into capital and maintenance, and maybe even the number of staff you have. Frankly, that's all got to be heavily reviewed and find ways to fund it, which is obviously needs your great support of your bank. Our bank has been very supportive of us, I suppose. We're in a fairly unique situation, so we're a bit lucky there, but it certainly means that we are working to pay the profits and the wages of people who are out there in the beautiful surrounds of London, rather than really paying for profits and wages of people here in Australia. We're essentially working for them.
Do you think they're bad sports at cricket? Who knows? Look,
well, that's right. Yeah, it is. Insurance is a cyclical industry, so they say it'll come back. And that price will come down most likely, and it could be as early as next year. But it is. I think we've got a lot to learn from New Zealand. New Zealand have been fairly smart in capping a lot of payments and keeping insurance costs down by doing that. But Australia hasn't gone down that route. But I think it's. I think these bushfires have put us in a situation where really we probably need to look at that more closely. And I think it would be absolutely headline news today if it wasn't for the coronavirus.
You mentioned the bushfires. You were critical of the enforced evacuation of O'Reilly's in September. Tell us about that. I mean, I couldn't believe it. Again, I read this and I thought, in this day and age, is that really happening?
Well, you can't blame anyone. It was a mistake. There's no doubt about that, and certainly the authorities have confirmed that. But it can't be blamed on anyone. There's so many pressures on people in those situations. Their main aim is to save lives, and they're often working in an area that they don't know and they're not really familiar with, and they're people who are put under tremendous pressure, and people sometimes just make the calls, and in hindsight, you think, well, surely that was a strange call to make, and that's one of those things we've been told that it just won't happen again, but it did, and it was a shame, but that's life. We get on with it.
$400,000 later.
Yeah, it cost us about 260 in cancellations within 24 hours, and then another. We estimate very, very minimally another 140, 150 in lost bookings over that next week. So it's one of those things. Could have done without it, but compared to coronavirus, it's fairly minimal. Look at it now.
It is. Come on, vaccine. Look, now the future of O'Reilly's. I mean, we're talking to a tourist operator in the Tweed last week, and he says, dreadful as it is, you can sometimes sit down and reevaluate and discuss new initiatives and different ways of operating. Are you doing that, or are you just thinking about going back to dairy cattle and becoming a dairy again? And a vineyard, of course.
Well, I did sort of joke about we could go back to dairy cattle, so it's a strange situation where farming looks to be a more stable and profitable industry than tourism. No, we don't really have that intention. And yes, starting probably next week, we intend to sit down and start reviewing every aspect of our business and just looking at ways to see how we can change. Because when you're working and you're busy and we're sort of full most weekends, there's not a lot of opportunity to really change things in any substantive way. You sort of have a gradual evolutionary change. But this certainly gives us an opportunity to sit down, really review what we're doing and say, well, we might make a more substantive change here when we reopen. O'Reilly's might be, I'd say it probably will be a little bit different to when we closed.
Okay, just there's only you and I and a bunch of others listening. Just some ideas that you have for these changes, because you are iconic, and I mean, really, everybody in Australia knows of O'Reilly's, so any change you make could affect maybe the future for those customers. So will you just enhance the best bits, or will you do some dramatic changes?
Well, I think we've but this day we'll look at trends, and the trends are particularly in the scenic rim, the eat local trend, and that's been quite strongly promoted and got very good feedback. And I think, if anything, this coronavirus has probably highlighted the importance of that more so. So we have a lot of land up here. We have ourselves quite a bit of spare land, and possibly we could go back to looking at what O'Reilly's did when it first opened, and it was essentially grew all its own vegetables, and we've got beautiful volcanic soil here that vegetable growing is made for. And that's just one possibility. We could go back and start looking to become a little bit more self-sufficient.
So you actually then go to enhance almost perfection, because that just follows on what you're all about anyway, doesn't it?
Well, it does, yeah. I think people generally come for us for nature, and for food and relaxing, and so we have changed our activities over the years a bit by adding in a number of soft adventure activities. But again, this would be probably an opportunity to really look at that in a bit more detail and see if we can't organise something else to have another attraction, another reason to coming on the activity front in time for when we reopen.
What's the future of tourism in the hinterland and the Gold Coast? I know one is really beautiful, Mother Nature. The other is sort of like wham, bam, thank you, ma'am sort of stuff because it's really full-on activities, beaches, that sort of stuff. So chalk and cheese here, but the overall package, where do you see the future of the Gold Coast and its surrounding areas in tourism?
Yeah, well, I do think the coast, and they certainly have in the recent years, they've embraced the hinterland and the scenic rim much more than they did before, and so Brisbane marketing for that matter. And I think this is again a reflection of their clientele saying that they like the bright lights, but they actually quite like country as well. And this country that we've got here is very close to those urban areas. So you can do a day trip or you can be out for a weekend or a stay without a long drive. You can do it in a couple of hours. And I think as the product, the accommodation product and the activity product evolves in the scenic rim, we'll see a further interest from these urbanites who are wanting to get out and experience a little bit of country, whether it's for a weekend or whether it's a longer stay for holidays. And again, I think if anything, this whole coronavirus is probably going to support that more so. I think the domestic market will be relatively stronger than the international market once we get back to some normality. And I think people will be very focused on family, on friends, on close activity and supporting their local providers and local tourism businesses. So I think that speaks very, very strongly for the scenic rim and the hinterland of the Gold Coast.
Can we safeguard against future tourism slumps, or is that a little bit too hard? It will be interesting because I see the International Monetary Fund this morning is saying we're looking at the deepest recession since the 1930s. Coming towards the world, and does that mean that people won't have the money to holiday? I'm sure that's going to be a challenge for people once it starts again. However, it's up to us as a business, I suppose. Some product is still attractive on a value front for people to holiday with. The international market will be, I think, those people who really just focus on the international market, I would think that their business model would have to be reviewed because we have always been, 80% in the domestic, and I think probably that's maybe where people need to look back to. If they're the other way around, they're 80% international, that puts them at high risk and they're going to take a fair while to recover. I would imagine they would need to relook at what they do and what they charge and how they position it so that the domestic market hopefully is more attractive to their product in future. What are the most important issues for tourism operators? Government promotion is important, but what can the individual operators do?
Well, that's by accessing government, you mean?
Yes, I mean, for example, the Queensland government, the federal government, local government, they promote this tourist destination. But a lot of businesses just rely on that as a promotion. You don't. You actually are out there, and a lot of businesses do that, but there are many that don't, so they wait for someone else to do it. So if you were say if you bought a B&B and you were set up in, just say, Broadbeach, it would be pretty foolish, wouldn't it, just to rely on those government entities to promote you. I mean, sure, that helps, but you also need to tell people what you're about. So what sort of promotion can a business do that sort of maybe goes hand in hand with the government promotion?
Yeah, well, I'd go almost the other way and say I wouldn't rely on them at all because that's putting your
I was being
life
polite.
in their hands.
I was being polite.
Yeah, I'm not, unfortunately, but no, these days there's really no excuse for, even down to someone's got one B&B, there's absolutely no excuse for not marketing themselves through social media. And anyone who's not doing that, I'd find it hard to believe they're not, because the business that you generate through social media now, whether they're purely sharing, customers sharing photos and experiences, or whether you're using paid ads, but they all work pretty well. And I suppose for us, we're maybe more focused in that area than most, particularly Instagram, because we're a very picturesque destination. Instagram is made for us, but we focus very heavily on that, as well as Facebook, of course, and a few of the others. But the way the market now works is that if you can get your business out there and someone else is sharing it with their friends and saying how good it was, my God, that's the best marketing you'll ever have. You'll cut through everything and you'll have a steady stream of people to your front door. And that's where pretty well all our efforts go these days, is into ensuring that those lovely photos people take, we share them. We put, paid ads up to help where it's needed. But the social media now is so good, and I think it's just made for Queensland tourism, because generally speaking, we are a picturesque, beautiful country, and that's what we really want to have people promoting. And I think that's the future of marketing of tourism, more so than the older big agencies that try and do broadcast ads for the whole of Queensland. Maybe that works for international, but I don't think it works domestically anymore.
Okay, now that it's Easter. I mean, I really dislike Easter, except for the religious side of things, but nothing was opened. Well, every day has been like Easter of late. But to get you through these times of hardship and concern, you have some fabulous wines. As a suggestion, because not that I'm giving you a overt plug here, but as a suggestion, what sort of wine would you suggest, or a couple of wines that would help you through the coronavirus from your vineyard?
Well, it is quite amazing. It is quite amazing that our online sales over the last week, we probably sold more online in the last week than we sold last year. They've just exploded, and we've got staff going down there every day to pack wine up and send it out. So it's certainly, again, hitting a chord, and we're packaging things like O'Reilly's books with it, and giving really good specials to make it really good value, and people are responding to that. So I think that works. What type of wine? Well, it's wine is unfortunately so individual. Believe me, there's some wine that we sell which I'm not a great fan of and people just love, and there's other wines I think are pretty good, and I get told by people that don't like it at all. So it's very much up to the individual. But I think with wine, it's a bit like walking tracks and national parks, and viewing the different areas of Queensland. It's going back to the same one all the time probably doesn't teach you enough or give you enough experience. I think you've got to keep trying with wine, a new wine, different whites and varieties we have in Queensland, Queensland now has so many different varieties that we are growing. And if you don't like red, some people say they don't like red, well, that's fine. Maybe they should just start with then a rosé and then maybe slowly go to something a lighter style of red, a Sangiovese or a Nebbiolo, which again are growing out of Stanthorpe these days, and they don't have to go and use a heavy red; they can use a light red. And as long as they're experiencing it and finding it's okay, they'll probably find their palate develops, and they will like it in the end.
Maybe for your next meeting for future initiatives, a couple of glasses or bottles prior to that might induce some creativity.
Well, I've tried that on many times. It sometimes works, and sometimes comes a cup of tea.
Well, you seem to forget it. That's the trouble after the third bottle. What happened last night? So maybe you need to take notes down, but not too many notes. Otherwise, you never know what might happen down the future. Look, Shane, pleasure chatting with you. If somebody wants to find out, okay, you're closed at the moment until the coronavirus just dissipates, but for good wine and to find out more about you, how do they do that?
Well, our website is got our latest information on there, and we're sending out specials all the time. And we will have staff back in our offices from next week to answer phone calls and emails now that the JobKeeper thing, it seems, is all come through. So, yeah, we won't be operating as an accommodation business, but our cafe up on the mountain is still open. We're still doing takeaways from there, and I see our vineyard's still doing wine sales and picnics down there if people want to try it. But, it seems to be fairly strongly indicated that maybe this weekend everyone stay at home, but then maybe next week people might be able to get out.
Who knows?
They're getting a little bit of cap and feeder.
Yep. O'Reillys.com.au is the website. Shane O'Reilly from O'Reillys. Thank you very much for your time, and we'll chat later.
Thanks, Mike.
Hi, Mayor Tom Tate here. We all need to change how we do things right now. It's not always easy, but small things can make a big difference. If you need to buy food or do some exercise, please do it in your own neighbourhood or suburb. Staying close to home will keep everybody safer. And remember, we are all in this together.
You're listening to the Coast Business Radio podcast.
James Owen was elected to Tweed Shire Council in 2016. His career has spanned the not-for-profit, public and corporate sectors in a number of roles ranging from events and stakeholder engagement, marketing and communication, policy and strategy, and sales and business development. On the line is Councillor James Owen. Councillor, welcome.
Thanks, Mike. Thanks for having me.
Okay, pretty interesting times to say the least. Can't go to the beach. We can't basically travel to New South or vice versa because of obvious restrictions unless you have a permit, and makes life considerably more stressed out than we would normally be at this time of the year. Now, we're saying also Easter is pretty horrible anyway because nothing is open. Well, every day is like an Easter.
Yeah, it is. Some people can go to the beach still. If you live close to the beach and it's within your suburb, then certainly here in New South Wales, in Tweed, people are able to walk down to the beach. And I think for many people, and I've fought pretty hard to make sure that we can keep our beaches open. We have just closed a lot of our car parks, and that was really to stop a big influx of people from, not just Queensland, but other parts of the state potentially coming to Tweed, because there have been concerns about people not social distancing. So, in theory, if you're exercising, you can go to the beach. And I was down there this morning on my morning walk trying to make the most of this time. And yes, Easter's going to be a very strange one. As we were just discussing, Good Friday, with everything closed normally, isn't necessarily going to be much different. But the shops are going to be, I think, with a lot of people rushing down there today with queues, because they're only letting a certain number of people in the stores now. So I think through the afternoon today, it could be quite a busy time down there at some of the shops. And I just hope that, people can... It's difficult because it is scary, and I hope people can sort of stay calm and respect each other and respect those that are trying to implement the rules that we've just had to do because of this terrible virus that's going around at the moment.
So how badly has the Tweed region been affected by recent events?
Oh, it's huge. I spoke this morning to one of the general managers of one of our clubs, the Seagull Leagues Club out there at West Tweed. I mean, they're completely shut down and they have no idea at the moment when they're going to be opening again. So there's a lot of issues there. I mean, the JobKeeper measures that passed last night are going to help them and a lot of other organisations. But that's only really just going to keep the staff and the employees, paid, and that's great. But in terms of, we're concerned some clubs in Tweed might not come back from this. I spoke to the CEO of Queensland Airports Limited. I mean, the airport at Gold Coast dissects the border. They're down to about 1% of their normal daily traffic. They normally have about 20,000 people through their terminal. They're now at about 200 yesterday. And I think at some point they may well just close the airport altogether. That's obviously a significant hit to their revenue. My day job's with a rugby league club. Our season's been cancelled, so we're part of the Queensland Rugby League competition, the Intrust Super Cup, and I've just got off a call with our team. There'll be no rugby league in the Queensland Cup this year, and we've obviously lost sponsors, or sponsors are actually being very good. They're saying they're going to support us through next year, but they're certainly not going to be opening up their checkbooks to the same degree as they have been this season. And even just simple things like funding that we get from the Queensland Rugby League, and that comes to all the rugby league clubs, that's going to be significantly reduced going forward. And then, of course, we've got all the cafes and restaurants and other businesses. I had a call first thing this morning from the Kingscliff physiotherapy clinic, and because we've closed the car parks, they're just concerned that people aren't going to be able to park, because there's going to be a lot of people parking on the street outside their place where they wouldn't normally park. And I suppose, and I did talk to them about it. I said, well, a lot of businesses aren't actually operating at the moment. So they were very understanding and very supportive of what they've done, what we've done, because there have been a lot of concerns within the community about social distancing not being followed and big influx of tourists when people aren't supposed to travel. So, after talking to them, they accepted it. And I think that's a good thing. People are starting to accept it. And I think there's also a lot of innovation going on when you look at what some of the restaurants and cafes and other businesses are doing in terms of evolving their business model, which I think going forward will probably be permanent sort of evolutions of business models and things to try and, support them to get through this time, but also, what it looks like post-COVID-19.
So what are some of the initiatives from the council to assist?
So Tweed Shire Council has passed a number of measures. We are limited to some degree to what we can do, and at the moment we're also waiting to see what the state and federal government have been doing, and there's some great packages from both state and feds. But at the last week's council meeting, I think one of the most significant things we did was move to defer rate payments for all Tweed ratepayers, whether they're a business or a residential ratepayer, for up to 6 months. So it means that from now, if you're adversely financially affected by COVID-19, then you can apply to defer your rate payments for 6 months. Now, that's at the moment. We may well extend that if we feel the need to, and those deferrals can be paid back once you do start repaying them over a 2-year period with no interest. So that could potentially save, someone a couple of grand, or a business, even more. And at this time, and that actually came about. I got a couple of neighbours. They're both aircrew with Virgin, and the father, they've got a young family, mortgage, all the usual things that young families have. And the father approached me because they've both been stood down on unpaid leave, and obviously there's concerns about Virgin going forward. So they're in a real pickle, and very scared, I think. And he was just looking for any way that they might be able to save a few bucks. So a rate deferral such as this is going to really help a family like that. And we've done other things like waive our outdoor dining fees for 12 months. We have a little airfield, so we're rebating our annual fees there, marina fees as well. That's going to save businesses about $138,000. one thing that we did try and get through was to freeze the rate increase, which is a 2.6% increase that's rate pegged every year by the New South Wales government. And unfortunately, that didn't get supported by enough councillors to get through. But that would have been a nice little, probably $50, depending on how big your rates are for each household or equally commercial ratepayers. But unfortunately, that wasn't supported by all councillors. So, but I'm still working on that. We'll see if we can get that through. And we're actually talking to the state government about whether we can get some support to be able to do that, to help people out. So there's some of the things that council's doing.
But council itself must be taking a hit in the revenue stream, and you need that revenue for public works and keeping the council moving forward. That also must be concerning.
It is. One of the big things that, a couple of points there I'd make is, one, our holiday parks. We've got our Tweed Coast holiday parks. Now, they're a significant source of revenue for us, around about $7 or $8 million a year. Now, they're completely closed. So we've got no income coming in from them whatsoever. And they're a good source of revenue to help fund things like the Kingscliff foreshore redevelopment. $7 or $8 million of profits from the holiday parks went towards making that happen. The other challenge that we have is that we can't borrow between reserves. So in Tweed, we provide all the water and sewer for the entire Shire, and those water and sewer funds, and also our developer contribution pools of money are sort of, and rightly so, they kept very separate from our general revenue and cash flow. But at a time like this, it would be quite beneficial for us to be able to utilise some of the funds that are there for a short period of time, because, for example, we are deferring these rate payments. So, cash flow is impacted there with things like the holiday parks. Even simple things like, people aren't out about in their cars. So there's no, from parking fines and things like that. Revenue's definitely down. It is a concern. But we're like everyone else. We've just got to do whatever we can in the circumstances, and we're lucky at Tweed. We do have very good staff, so they're looking at whatever we can do to get through this.
So how long do you, for example, with all the sectors, including tourism, how long do you think it'll take for them, once we get out of this black hole, to recover, if ever?
Well, I don't know. I couldn't put a time on it. I do know, for example, if we were, and one of the arguments against this rate increase freeze was that because of rate pegging, that amount, it's about $2 million a year, give or take, for council so now that compounds every year. So over 30 years, that's a $70 million hit to our bottom line that we could never recoup, or we'd have to find other ways or other areas to take that from. So, there's a 70-year timeline potentially in that. And look, I'm sure we could have found ways, and that's why I supported the rate increase freeze. But, holiday parks, we provide funding for a tourism company to run our tourism for the Tweed Shire, to try and, promote and market and get people to come to Tweed to visit. Well, what's that going to look like going forward? I mean, tourism has just been annihilated. And speaking to Chris Mills from Gold Coast Airport this morning, internationally, we just don't know when those borders are going to be opened up. Fortunately for Tweed, though, most big chunk of our tourism, the majority of it is domestic. So we look for people from the Gold Coast, Brisbane, particularly Queensland, but also in the winter months, people coming from places like Victoria and Sydney to come. So as soon as we can open up those domestic routes again, and it's weeks or months away, probably months away, But still, as soon as we can do that, there's going to be a big focus and a big push on encouraging people to travel regionally. And, they were already starting to look at that post-bushfires, and even though we weren't really affected here by the bushfires, there was still going to be a big push to try and encourage people to visit the regions. So how long is it going to take? I don't know. Some places aren't going to recover. There's going to be, if you like, a natural attrition of businesses that just weren't, were doing it tough anyway. But equally, I think new businesses and business models are going to evolve out of that as well.
And I think all those business models, though, require people. So, you might have the best business model in the world, but if we have these restrictions and social distancing, which, let's face it, could be around for a long time until they find that vaccine, and they haven't found a vaccine for SARS or MERS yet, and it's in the same family, so who knows? All we could say is maybe we could hop on a boat with our Mount Warning tours, head over to Husk Distillery and sip away the woes of the world.
Well, potentially, and they are talking about relaxing, and again, not for weeks or potentially months, but relaxing restrictions on things like cafes and restaurants, potentially on sport as well. I mean, there is talk about the NRL, starting up again. The timelines that they're talking about might be a little bit ambitious, but if something like that takes off, then that's really good for people, and that could be a good test case if you can run that comp and keep the spread, the community spread down. That's a good little test, and I think that's what they're saying is they'll gradually start opening up areas and sectors that they feel safe, if you like, and just start doing it that way. But equally, there are going to be a lot of areas where they just can't do it. I mean, 6 months for the JobKeeper payments to keep, and I think it makes a lot of sense to keep employees connected to the employer, because as soon as you lose them into the welfare system or they're severed from the company, then it makes it very, very difficult to recruit and rehire people and retrain people. But Mike, I really, I'm no medical expert, but we can only hope that we can start to see some little glimpses of light at the end of the tunnel and some little restrictions being eased so that, it gets, we can start generating a bit of income and getting those people moving about a bit more freely.
They talk about extending and the AFL season and also for rugby, and that the AFL may even go, and rugby also go into November. If they push it out a bit longer, we could have a Christmas Day grand final. How weird's that?
It would be weird, but at the same time, I think people would just love it. I think people are really, really missing their sport at the moment. And, sport's a great way to really bring the community together and get people excited. I mean, they talk about the State of Origin potentially starting an NRL season as and when it kicks off would be fantastic, because I think that would really get people, really be a big boost to morale and what have you. And I'm pretty sure, as soon as it's possible, it will happen.
Could you imagine, though, the possibilities are on the Saturday afternoon we could watch the AFL or Saturday evening watch the AFL Grand Final, watch the cricket in the daytime, the Boxing Day Test, and swing over to the NRL for their Grand Final on the Sunday. Could be a stunning Christmas break if it all goes that way.
I think the bottle shops would love that one, wouldn't they?
That's right. There'll be there's an upside to every downside, isn't there?
Well, there are, and as hard as it look, the mental health side of things is really concerning. We're only in early days, and I think the shock, you go through those stages of grief, and this could be similar. I think the shock is still there, and I think as the new normal starts to really kick in, we've got Easter coming up. So there's a bit of excitement. It's going to be a different Easter, but there's still a bit of excitement. It's Easter, it's the holidays. People don't have to work from home or do anything. You can just relax for a bit. But that new normal is really going to start to take hold with kids at home and people working from home and just not being able to go out and connect with others. Again, it's a bit novel to be able to do video conferencing. I mean, we can now, for the first time, actually have our council meetings virtually, and that was emergency legislation passed by the New South Wales government, which is all well and good, but there's nothing that beats that actual...
No.
I mean, humans are creatures of connection and community and hanging out with each other. We love it, but I'm just really concerned that in maybe a month or two, when this is the norm and it's still going on, that mental health side of things is really going to be something we need to focus on as much as possible.
Interesting times ahead. We need to continue this conversation to some extent, maybe in the next few weeks. We don't know what's going to happen in the future, and that's the problem. As the Prime Minister said, we haven't got a map. And so we don't know which way to go. So we're just sort of hoping that we all do the right thing along the way. Councillor James Owen from the Tweed Shire Council. Enjoy Easter. I suggest a red wine and some Easter egg for the kiddies. Forget the red wine.
I will do. Thanks, Mike. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, James.
As the coronavirus outbreak continues, it's important to stay well informed. A national plan has been activated to manage the virus and support our community. As more is learned about the virus and the way it spreads, the plan will be adapted and we will let you know about the latest advice. For up-to-date information, visit australia.gov.au. Together, we can help stop the spread and stay healthy. Authorised by the Australian Government, Canberra.
Talking business, nothing but talk.
The RSPCA has centres throughout Queensland where they rescue, rehabilitate and rehome animals. Of course, they do much more. They operate commercial businesses. There is more we can all do for them, such as volunteer and donate. George Costi is the State Operations Manager of RSPCA Queensland. George, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Mike. I appreciate the invitation.
Look, you've been with the RSPCA for 9 years. Some of the highlights and achievements.
I think some of the highlights for myself is a program that I implemented called Operation Wanted, which is a statewide desexing program that, in partnership with 26 regional councils and 200 vets, offers a 20% discount for a 3-month period, being June, July, August of every year. And we historically have desexed between 12,000 and 20,000 animals over that time frame, and it's a very proactive initiative implemented by the RSPCA and myself.
The RSPCA has reduced services across the state. Why is this?
We've been severely impacted by the coronavirus. A couple of weeks ago, we closed all our off-shop businesses, 16 of them across the state. We also operate 2 very large retail outlets, and at this point they're operational purely just as a service for the general public. But we have 6 op shops, or we have 6 op shops on the Gold Coast that were always very successful, but given the restrictions placed upon the RSPCA and these particular business units as a result of donations and volunteer support and the reduction in people visiting these facilities, we were forced to close all 6 Gold Coast shops and 9 of the other regional op shops. And they were quite very successful in raising desperate in this organisation.
So what's the impact? I mean, of course the impact is severe, but the impact on the animals themselves, I mean, less shops, less money means tougher times.
Yeah, we also have 9 regional centres, and obviously our inspectorate are situated and placed in a multitude of regional centres across Queensland. And we've minimised our services in all our centres, but we're still operational. You can still actually adopt an animal, but it's by phoning in or getting on the website and having a look and making an appointment, but restricted services across the state in terms of staffing and operating hours, but each centre is still active and still helping animals in needs across the state. We are financially affected negatively as a result of this. Even donations and fundraising activities have stopped, so it's put the RSPCA in a very difficult and tight situation financially.
It was reported in one of the newspapers just recently that adoptions had increased because people were home by themselves. And I sort of looked and I thought, is that really the case? Is it really the case?
It's actually the case, not just here in Queensland, Australia, but overseas and majority of countries. Yeah, that is the case, and it spiked. And adoptions for those last couple of weeks did decrease across all our centres. What we've done is actually placed all our animals that would be traditionally in the care centres out to foster. Mm-hmm. And if you jumped on the RSPCA website, you can still look at all the animals that are available for adoptions through our virtual adoption initiative that we implemented. But back to your original question, Mike, yeah, 100% our adoption spiked in the last couple of weeks, but they're starting to taper off now.
Can you tell me about the statewide desexing program?
Yeah, that's the one I mentioned earlier on, the Operation Wanted. It's been going now this will be its 6th year, and we're in the process of making the decision as to whether we continue it again this year. And we've already got 100 vet clinics signed up, and several of the councils have committed financially to keep the program going. So at this point, we're evaluating the program, but it's our intention to keep it going. And it's a very simple formula. Councils and RSPCA support the program financially. All the vet clinics offer a 20% discount during that period, which makes a difference to a lot of people that can't afford desexing, and allows people to have their animal desexed at a reduced price throughout Queensland. And I think I mentioned last year we had 260 vet clinics participating and 26 regional councils supporting the program financially. And what the money is used for goes into advertising and driving awareness of the program and help the patrons and the vet clinics get together to have their animals desexed at a reduced price.
So if those are listening right now, they're thinking about, okay, it's and it is a great organisation. You've been around since Adam, not yourself, but since the organisation, since Adam was a boy. How do they keep this service viable? What do you need at the moment?
RSPCA, like many welfare organisations and profits, are dependent on donations and fundraising, and it is tough times for everybody, and we understand that. But if everyone can give a little bit to the organisation and other animal welfare groups as well to keep our activities going during this period, financial support is always preferred. So if anyone can jump on any of our websites, there are portholes there that allow people to donate, and that the money is used for our inspectorate, it's used for our animal ambulance services, our regional centres and our vet hospitals. RSPCA has 2 massive big hospitals. One is designated to wildlife, and we actually take in close to 18,000 wildlife animals at the Waco Vet Clinic there, and our other domestic clinic takes in close to about 12,000 domestic animals as well. So money raised and donations always is well spent and needed to help animals.
The future of the RSPCA in Queensland, you mentioned some have closed. Will they reopen, and where do you see it?
Well, the majority of our business units have closed, given that the revenue in some cases disappeared altogether or was reduced by 90%. It is our intention, when this is all over, to reactivate all our business units. We have 6 units on the Gold Coast, so it's our intention to get them up and running, and same with all the regional centres. It's a case day-by-day proposition, and when we open them will be determined what state government and what the Australian government allows us to do so as well. But it's vital that we get these businesses up and running because they do contribute a large amount of funds that help keep the RSPCA going. It's going to be difficult going forward. Whether the RSPCA comes out of this the same or in another format is yet to be seen, but it's had a really, really bad impact on us financially and operationally as well. But as I said, we've managed to keep every regional centre open, reduce services, but they're all open from Cairns right down to the Gold Coast, inland to Toowoomba and Kingaroy.
Okay, if somebody wants to donate, I would imagine they go to rspcaqld.org.au to find out more and donate.
Absolutely, and all the information on all our facilities and all our operations on our website. So donating financially is preferred, and when this is all over, we love volunteers to volunteer in all our op shops and our retail shops and at our animal care centres as well. And we love taking good donations that we can on-sell. But at this point, we can't take them because all our businesses are closed. But yes, go onto the RSPCA website and definitely, if you can help, it'd be much appreciated.
And just as a sidebar, you remind me of a condensed version of the Leyland brothers. Well, just tell us what your movements are today. You're all over the state. Tell me that you must love driving.
Oh, I can chalk up to about 70 to 80,000 k's a year. Jesus. And part of my role is I support the regional facilities as well. So I tend to I drive up to Bundaberg, sometimes Rockhampton, and fly from there to Mackay, Gladstone, Townsville, or even Cairns. So, southeast Queensland, I do a lot of driving, and I spend a lot of time in my car and on the phone, Mike.
And you do that well. Don't know about the driving bit, but the part on the phone, magnificent.
Thank you.
George Costi, State Operations Manager of RSPCA Queensland, thank you very much and have a great Easter.
Thank you for allowing me to have a chat to you today, Mike. Have a nice day. Bye-bye.
If you're in business in Australia, right now you're facing one of your toughest challenges. It's not business as usual, and it's hard to know where to turn. Business Australia can help you manage your responsibilities to your employees, look after their health and well-being, and assist with strategies to maintain and sustain your business. We've been helping Australian businesses through thick and thin for 194 years, and we're here for you now. For free advice and support, visit businessaustralia.com.
This is the Coast Business Radio Podcast.
Lost Palms Brewing Company makes great craft beer. Tasty, casual food, scrumptious with craft beer, is family, kid and dog friendly. With games to a relaxed vibe, it's a local neighbourhood brewery in a pure sense. Now, since the national shutdown, the brewery has been converted to a takeaway window for beer and merchandise. Still open 7 days from 11 till 4. The kitchen is closed, though, until social distancing restrictions are lifted. On the line, Sales and Marketing Manager for Lost Palms, Zac Nalder. Zac, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Now, I really miss those Sunday afternoons and all the outdoor stuff at your brewery. But you've sort of adapted with a takeaway sort of philosophy. Tell us about this.
Yeah, so I guess you're not alone in that. There's a few people missing out and missing us. It's sad to see the tap room not full on weekends, but in its place, we've been able to connect with the locals just from them being able to pop in, grab themselves a carton or two, dress themselves in some fresh new threads, new clothes, and get on their way and do the Lost Palms experience at home.
How has it not adjusted but changed your attitude or direction, or have you had to pull out rabbits out of the hat?
Every couple of days it's a reassessment, especially for the first few weeks of everything happening. There was just constant changes and constant things we had to be aware of. One, from the operational capacity of our tap room. Two, from all of our wholesale venues and partners, whether they're able to still operate, whether they're choosing to, whether they're doing takeaway. No, so it's been lots of change. Most of our marketing is directed just specifically towards our very local area, and just keeping it very much in the Miami through to Central Gold Coast postcodes. Just targeting anyone that still has access to pop in and pick up some things locally from the brewery, or we can drop off a carton or two of an afternoon so they can enjoy some fresh beers at home.
If this continues, some are saying 6 months, some are saying longer, some are saying not as long, but whatever way we look at it, it's still going to be a fair whack of time. How viable is it for businesses, not just your own, but say businesses that do a similar operation as a brewery or a microbrewery? How do you stay afloat? Because your product is beer, and you've got to get rid of that beer and make new beer. Otherwise, it just sort of comes to a grinding halt, doesn't it?
Yeah, so I guess it is very much treading water at the moment. Thankfully, beer is an essential service, and it's even more so now, I think, than ever. So there is still retail partners, so people, local bottle shops in the greater Gold Coast, Northern Rivers and Southern Brisbane area that still need beer supplied to them, which is lucky. And then the tap room just offering that takeaway element, sort of keeping the beer flowing in and out of the tanks and into cans and off to all the people out there that need it.
Okay, Lost Palms, what's the difference between your beer and, say, Black Hops or other beers? Everyone's got a point of difference. Okay, as the marketing manager for My Second Heaven, what's the difference? Why is Lost Palms different from other beers?
I guess we try and offer everyone that escape, which is just beer, craft beer, whatever you want to call it. It's a mass appeal brand that very much invokes escapism, and having that kind of 10 to 15 minutes up to an hour, depending on how fast we get through a can. That time of the day is yours, and you don't have to overcomplicate it. You don't have to think too much about it. You just get to sit back, enjoy that beer, no matter if you're a craft drinker, a classic drinker, drinks and supports local. We're for you. And I guess having that chance in the day to sit back, relax, and sip on something that's suited to you is all we can really hope for and wish for and look forward to on a daily basis at the moment.
And recipes, I was just thinking about it. There's a lot of recipes that have beer in it.
Yes, yeah, you can definitely get away with cooking a whole bunch at home. We've been working on a few recipes, the classic the chicken with beer can recipe, as well as some cocktails as well. People haven't used beer nearly as much to its potential in cocktails, especially with different beer styles that are now emerging, like sour beers and fruited beers. Mm-hmm. The opportunity to pair with cocktails and use them as a topper in a cocktail, use them in marinades. There's lots of different opportunities to kind of utilize beer that isn't just straight consuming it in its original form, kind of reinterpreting it and doing some different things with it. So there's plenty of opportunities people to do at home with just their counterpart or whoever they live with, try and maximise and enjoy beer in multiple ways. Yeah,
I mean, and with Easter, Easter egg and beer, beer with beer. I mean, it's it's just endless, the opportunities to wolf down a couple of tinnies, isn't it?
Oh, yeah, you don't have to twist my arm. I'll be right there with you.
Okay, we come out of this coronavirus, COVID-19 crisis. What do you see the landscape as being once we get out of it? Do you think there'll be a honeymoon period and then we're in trouble because we've got to repay, the government's got to start collecting to make sure that we've paid back what we've taken to get through this? Or do you think there will be a great hole? I mean, how do you see it? Because you deal with all these businesses, making sure they take your product. What do you see as the future once we get out of this COVID-19 crisis?
Yeah, it's really, really hard to predict. I guess the longer we have restrictions placed on venues, the more difficult it's going to be for them to get back out of it. But I'm not an economist or a politician, so it's hard for me to say definitely what it's going to look like. I'm hoping that best case scenario, we come back with a massive bang. All those people that have been either paid to stay at home or are continuing to get their full wage as cooped up and are ready to go out there and splurge and get back to spending in venues. In the interim, if everyone can head to local independent bottle shops, support other local independent beers and other producers, gin makers, rum makers, and the likes, that will help directly. Like, if you're not going out and spending at the venues in the interim, go out and spend it in a local independent bottle shop, grab some local independent drops and enjoy them in your home in the interim to kind of help those places survive. And then for the venues, as soon as we're able to reopen and get back to normal operation, get out there, enjoy yourselves, get to the events, get to the Friday happy hour, get to whatever you possibly can to get out there to support all these people, because they are the absolute lifeline of the Gold Coast. They are what generates and holds the culture. Often a lot of these small businesses actually support other local artists, whether it's the paintings hanging on the wall, whether it's the musicians playing there over the weekend. They're all doing their bit to support other elements of the local culture. So I guess we can all do our bit and get out there and support them when they support others.
You certainly hope once we get out of this that the happy hour may be extended to like 3. Is that a possibility? I don't know. Just a thought.
I reckon it'll be happy days for sure as soon as it's over.
Yeah, miss the burgers, the beer, some really cool music, and upstairs also at Lost Palms. So, if somebody wants to find out more about how they can get their hands on some quality beer, how do they do that?
We've got the taproom bottle shop window is open 7 days, excluding public holidays, from 11 till 4 daily. If heading out and about or spending too long at one place is, I guess, not up your alley right now, then you can jump online and click and collect through the Bopple app. Head to our website, lostfarms.com.au, and order for delivery there. Call us up over the phone from Monday to Friday, and if you live in the local postcodes of 4220, 4221 or 4218, we'll come and drop it off to your house. Or head to some local bottle shops. So most independent celebrations, also the super sellers groups, and then a few other local independent bottle shops in the area will stock not just our local products, but also local breweries, distilleries, and other producers in the area. So you can head out and support them.
Zac Nalder, Sales and Marketing Manager from Lost Palms Brewing Company, thank you very much, and we'll have a beer for you.
Oh, mate, I'll get settle on the other side of this.
We're talking business, nothing but talk.
This is the Coast Business Radio Podcast.